Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With episode 753 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and it is Thursday, so you know exactly what that means. We are here to talk all things NXT and AEW, both brands building to major shows in the middle of July, unfortunately running somewhat head-to-head with one another, completely WWE's fault in that case. I digress. Nevertheless, plenty happening across both brands Tuesday and Wednesday night, a unique episode because we just went through two shows where we covered 4 consecutive hours of AEW programming due to I believe it was the NHL playoffs is why it specifically got moved. This week, 2.5 hours of AEW because there's no Collision to actually review. It was a special AEW Grand Slam Mexico show. So NXT, regular program, AEW, special show. We're going to break it all down before we get out of here today. On the way into this program, allow the Silver King to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcast and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Now, we're going to do a little bit more than NXT and AEW because it's such a thin show content-wise. We're going to wrap up 2 weeks of Evolve probably in less than 90 seconds. That's my guess. But I was able to catch up on both of those programs. So we're going to get to everything else.
But I'm afraid I've got some bad news.
And unfortunately, that bad news is for AEW because Jon Moxley and AEW are being sued by a member of the production crew, specifically a cameraman, it seems, for negligence, civil assault, and battery. The claim is severe neck and shoulder injuries as a result of being shoved to the ground unexpectedly by Mox in a 2023 match. Now, I don't feel like spending a ton of time on this, because, like I said, we have an otherwise short show, and I'd really love to get to my weekend. But to provide some details here. First, this is not an AEW employee, rather a contractor through a broadcast services company. That's extremely common in sports production. Even major networks, CBS, ESPN, Fox, they use some of these contractors. The individual claims are that he required cervical fusion surgery, shoulder surgery, and treatment for other injuries. Viewing the footage, reading the claim, it seems like Mox was supposed to grab a screwdriver from this guy, and that's it. Instead, he forcibly shoved him to the ground, and this dude landed hard on his neck and shoulder area. There's no question it was a purposeful, significant shove, the type that if they reviewed it in an NBA game, would absolutely draw a flagrant one at a minimum. Arm extended, elbow out, like the whole 9 yards. I state that because I've seen a lot of these tribal AEW fans downplaying it as if this dude didn't take a legitimate fall. First of all, it's not a bump because he's not a professional wrestler. Second of all, if you watch the video, the guy fell hard. Visually, it is crystal clear he was shoved to the ground, landed badly. Plus, if we learned anything from this week in wrestling, bad things can happen to our fragile bodies from the most minor falls and movements. I'm referring to Liv Morgan, of course. But consider Sami Zayn dislocating his shoulder while pumping up the crowd during his debut against John Cena. He's pumping up the crowd. Shoulder comes out of its socket. He wrestled the match anyway. But it was insane that actually happened to him, not even getting physically involved. A non-contact shoulder dislocation. Now, there are parts of this lawsuit that are ridiculous, seemingly conflating Mox's on-screen character with his real person. In terms of the ask, all the suit says is that it exceeds $25,000. That would be a completely reasonable number, perhaps shockingly low because 2 surgeries were required, but that's the minimum listed. So who knows what type of figure they're actually seeking. This, to me, it seems like a no-win situation for AEW or for Mox. It's a settlement. Just get it done. If you're Tony Khan, pay the man his money, to quote Kenny KGB. But it was a big headline early in this week, so we had to discuss it here. People make mistakes. Mox clearly made one. Pay the guy, move on with your lives. Someone else who made a mistake, by the way, was Ricochet, who retweeted this story, and the retweet that he kind of quoted, it said, "We live in a world of pussies." Now, he deleted it pretty quick, but it was frankly a dumbass tweet. And it's hysterical to me how people suggest he's like some generational heel because of his Twitter account, when really it's just tribal edgelord bullshit masked as him trying to do something and getting fans' panties in a bunch. If I'm the plaintiff's lawyer here, I love that he tweeted that. And I'm probably upping my ask because of it. That is not a move that helps active litigation against your company. The simple rule for everyone, whether you're an AEW wrestler or a WWE wrestler, if something controversial is happening, particularly if it involves a lawsuit against your company, shut the F up. Period. Before we get into it, I do need to remind you to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Not only can you get full-length audio episodes, you also get full-length video interviews and clips from our past interviews, all of it on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky. You will get episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can also send in questions and comments for the show. We will do our best to read them on the air. And please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
Hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news analysis every week. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. We would greatly appreciate your support as this show remains free and ad-free. So we have a ton to talk about on today's show. Now that we got that out of the way, we're going to kick off with NXT, briefly discuss Evolve, move over to AEW Grand Slam Mexico. There's a ton here. There are timestamps in the episode description, as always, so you can jump around if you want, but I hope you listen to the entire show. So kicking off with NXT, we had 4 Evolution Eliminator matches, which really were qualifiers, not eliminators, but I guess alliteration was the goal. And I'm also a little bit curious about what the eventual Fatal 4-Way match is going to be. We'll talk about that in a moment. The first match, Thea Hale against Jada Parker. Thea attacked Jada during her entrance at the cold open for the show. Parker showed off some new offense, including an inverted vertical suplex. Hale dodged her into the steel steps, cinched in the Kimura lock, avoiding a rope break before being powered into the corner. Hale locked it in twice more by just leaping on Parker, who actually tapped out behind the referee's back. Thea released the hold, thinking the match was over. Jada flattened her from behind with Hypnotic, got the win. This match way over-delivered to expectation. The finish was fantastic. Probably the most I've seen Jada literally sweat in a match. This girl was working and selling her ass off. Thea looked crazy strong in defeat, and her Kimura got put over. The idea of her being immature and trusting, assuming the tap was the end of the match and not the bell actually being rung, that can be used as a lesson learned, which I would actually love to see when it comes to young wrestlers. Having them actually make mistakes in storyline while in developmental, it is such a no-brainer, because then you can have a veteran take her aside and show her, hey, this is what happened. This is why you did this. And then you run a match a month later where something similar happens and she doesn't let go, and the referee calls the submission eventually. This was really nice work utilizing a Brazilian tap on this brand. You don't see that in NXT. Parker absolutely had to advance to the 4-way match, so this was the right call. The second match was Kalani Jordan against Lash Legend. Lash had new gear, and she was clearly back heel. She also had a new theme, which was one of 2 awful new ones on the night. Just absolute trash. Lonnie was in pink, looking kind of like she reverted a little bit. Legend delivered a bro kick and Argentine backbreaker, which Jordan eventually escaped with a code breaker. Lonnie hit a perfectly timed cartwheel back elbow and a perfectly executed sliced bread plus a frog splash. Lash snuffed out one of a kind, got knees up on a 450, murking Lonnie with Lash extension to get the win. Heading into commercial, I was ready to call TOD on Legend. Like, it was a really rough start in this match. Once she got warmed up, I saw flashes of potential that make her a real contender to become something in WWE. Lash was absolutely the right winner here. She's had far fewer opportunities than Lonnie, and they've been around pretty much the same time. Booking this so Lonnie mostly controlled the finish, only for Lash to catch her, thought that was pretty smart. Lonnie, she's improved so much in the ring. She does still just come off as a gymnast, though. I have a feeling it's all going to click for her at some point. I just don't know when that's going to be. Still needs to work on the promo and character and just the believability that she's more than just a fun-loving gymnast, A little side note on this match. Remember the Office episode where Jim and Daryl are like playing table tennis and Pam and Kelly, they get in a feud over it? Well, Lonnie and Lash, their boyfriends, are Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams, respectively. So I guess the rivalry continues through the girls. Zaruka were chatting backstage when Tatum Paxley crawled out of a closed crate with a completely naked doll. She wanted to say something to them, but ultimately did not. They walked to the ring. We had Zarya against Izzy Dame.
Big meaty man slapping meat. That's what I want.
That is what we got here. Izzy flashed some major power moves, including an impactful chokeslam. Zarya came back with a German suplex when Tatum appeared out of the crowd to hug Sol Ruka from behind. That distracted Zarya, who got caught by Dame with a Liger Bomb for the win. Zarya taking her eye off the ball and continuing to be distracted by Sol, that remains her fatal flaw. And it should probably be the impetus to end their friendship sooner than later. Dame getting a chance in this four-way that plays, it was disappointing not to get more of a match between them, given the distraction finish. I'm going to check while I'm speaking here. But yeah, this went 8:21, and it was the shortest match on the entire show, when really I was more interested in this than a lot of other matches that were on the program. Zarya later snapped at Paxley when Dame came up saying Zaruka aren't really her friends because they don't include her in their TikToks, and they would obviously include her if she was their friend, like Izzy would if Tatum wanted. This was so high school, it was ridiculous, but in the best way. Inclusion is what friendship is about, so Dame actually had a pretty great point here. The booking should probably be Paxley going with the culling, then realizing it's all a sham and breaking away. The only problem with that is it handicaps Tatum as a number 2 woman behind Izzy, just like she was number 2 behind Lyra Valkyria, and not necessarily number 1 with Shotzi and Gigi Dolan. She needs to stand on her own. And her storyline really should be learning that she doesn't need friends. She can be more successful believing in herself and fighting for herself and getting her own back. Will NXT go that deep? I can only hope. I'm glad Tatum is getting more TV time, but that's the type of story you give her if you're going to push her towards at least the Women's North American Championship. If not, hopefully, the Women's NXT Championship. Regarding Zarya, I see a lot of people disappointed with the way she's being booked. She's featured weekly, involved in a top storyline. Every single loss has been excused in one way or another. Not everyone can be pushed as a winner or champion at the same time. Do you not want Sol to be champion? JC Jane? Did you not want Stephanie Vaquer, Julia, Roxanne Perez pushed hard? Should Jordan Grace not get opportunities? Or Jada Parker? Zarya's been there less than a year. I promise you she'll be fine. And the final eliminator match was Jordan Grace against Lola Vice. This was the match of the night. Jordan got a new theme, which was so bad, fans actually chanted, "Fire Deaf Rebel."
Thank you!
Why the hell they would change her siren theme, I simply cannot tell you. But even worse than that was coming up with this. Lola caught Grace under pressure, her Vader bomb with a triangle choke. Vice then caught Grace on the top rope for an armbar, slamming her to the canvas for an arm breaker before hitting a roundhouse kick and an excellent false finish sequence. Jordan caught her attempted finish perfectly with a stretch muffler style slam, immediately adding beast mode for the win. This match rocked. Lola has gotten so much better in the ring. She emotes extremely well. The extended finish was the best 2 minutes of the entire episode. Jordan's catch suplex, that was something I've never seen before. Beast mode was snug as hell. She was the obvious winner here, but it was booked to make Vice seem more than game. This is like borderline 3.5, 3.75 stars, but it was very entertaining. So that brings us to a number 1 contendership fatal 4-way involving Parker, Legend, Dame, and Grace. In other words,
4 big men slapping meat equals excitement.
Now, using process of elimination, I just don't see Dame getting this chance right away. Similarly, Parker just challenged for the title a couple months ago. You might think Grace is a no-brainer to become the number 1 contender, generate a title change on Evolution, a significant show. What if I told you that Lash was born and raised in Atlanta, which is where Evolution is being held? So that took me from pretty confident Grace was winning to kind of 50-50 on this. And I'm actually going to go with Lash winning this because this is going to be an undercard match on a show that is headlined by WWE main roster superstars. If this was an NXT PLE, I'd pick Jordan. I noticed that this 4-way was also being called an eliminator. So if this is going to be a multi-fall match, that name makes a lot more sense for the series. I just don't know that that's going to be the case. But I am extremely curious to see the way NXT is used on Evolution. Is it just here? Are they going to do a battle royal again? We'll talk more about that in future weeks. Blake Monroe signing her NXT contract was the main event. Outside of a really stupid Glamour is Forever soundbite introduction, her Titantron and entrance theme were otherwise perfect. Why WWE insists on starting most entrances with spoken words, I will never understand, especially because after she says Glamour is Forever, there's a lip smacking sound drop like that, like a kiss. So that's your introduction. That's the thing that's the glass breaking. You don't need Glamour is Forever in front of that. Why are you actively making this shit worse? I just don't get it. Anyway, Monroe came out in a little black dress with a garter. And let's just say,
Gonna look good, but she's got me saying, hey now!
I was up all night.
I really should use that second one for NXT shows because it is, of course, Shawn Michaels. She made a sexual comment that seemed to be a little bit of a wink and a nod to Toni Storm before moving away from that, saying the spotlight and the world's best women's division itself both belong to her. Fatal Influence interrupted, angry that they never got celebrated like this for their title wins. Monroe called them insecure bitches. JC Jane called her flavor of the month, only to get punched right in the face. Fallon Henley got up on her in a return, only for JC to land rolling encore before they did a double almighty spinebuster through a table. I would have liked something a little bit meatier when it came to Monroe's promo, a bit more aggression, but she showed off her personality and then some, plus the presentation, like I said, it was 95% down. You get rid of that intro, it's fully on point. JC being the champion, hearing that talk, she absolutely had to answer or the entire deal would have felt hollow. At the same time, they're presently building a number one contender for Evolution, and Monroe hasn't done anything yet. So I hope she's at least wrestling Jasmine Nix and Henley before she gets to fight Jane, and I say that at a minimum. It really should be like 5 or 6 matches at a point before you get a title match. There's enough time to do that before SummerSlam weekend. If you want to go JC and Blake on that show, that would make a lot of sense. That, for me, would be the right play, especially if Jordan's not going to win the strap at Evolution, which she probably should not. The match most likely that needs to be made for a SummerSlam weekend show would be Jordan and Blake. But unless you're going to change the title beforehand, it's going to be almost impossible to get there. Josh Briggs, Yoshiki Inamura, and Elijah backstage, they got on the same page ahead of their 6-man match. Hank and Tank told the guys that they had a tag team title shot waiting when they were done. Obafemi came through, and they put over his win last week. He appreciated that. Then Trick Williams bumped into Oba for a quick stare down, remarking about Briggs and Inamura looking weird in their leather. Fair point from Trick. This was a fun little grouping between all these guys. The only part I disliked was the title match offer. Why? They once again don't deserve it. They lost head-to-head in April and lost their only tag team match since last week. The Calling should be getting a title match if anyone. So that was just dumb. The heels later commiserated with Trick, who was upset to learn Casey Navarro got injured and was not cleared. AJ Francis brought in Wesley as a replacement, and he was willing to bury the hatchet because Williams is a real superstar carrying the TNA title. Trick agreed to make good. All 6 guys dapped up. This was another really fun backstage segment that felt like 80% natural with a wrestling twist. First time I can remember seeing a real man actually apologize to another and then have it supported back in a wrestling context. Trick was like, I was wrong, dog. My bad. And Wes is like, me too. Let's just get this. That's so simple. Why don't we get that more? It is frustrating because it was so easy and it came across so well. So we had Briggs and Amora and Elijah against Williams, Francis, and Lee. Top Dollar did a great fake out of a Tope Con Hero attempt before getting caught with an Elijah flying elbow. Inamura did a really fun helicopter body slam on Wes. Trick botched a rope run bump pretty bad. It moved into a signature spam until Wes inadvertently took out Trick with Whisper in the Wind. He got tossed over the ropes into high rise, and then Inamura hit his splash, his very unique splash, to pin the TNA champion 1, 2, 3. What a surprise. That's one hell of a way to become a legitimate tag team title contender. Hell, it's a way to become a TNA title contender. Inamura Williams, it's a must now. That was my thought at the end of this. Otherwise, why would you book it that way? That's the one thing about NXT. You never know what's going to happen when you tune in Tuesdays at 8 o'clock. Imagine if I told you in 2023, hell, 6 months ago, that Inamura, a pro wrestling Noah star, would pin Trick, a WWE superstar who just won the TNA championship. Oh, by the way, it happened in a WWE ring. You'd think I'm on shrooms or something like that. This was a great time. AJ actually acquitted himself quite well. I imagine Wes was a huge upgrade from KC, who I just haven't seen wrestle. Briggs was surprisingly the weak link of the six-man, which I never would have expected. And like I said, this was just so unexpected that it had to have popped you. Immensely curious to see what's next. Well, we found out what's next. Briggs later put over Inamura saying he deserved the TNA title match, and surely Santino Marella was watching and would book it. Yoshi said he came back from Japan to be Josh's friend. And if he gets a TNA championship opportunity, he would give it to Briggs so he can go after the NXT title and they can win both. Okay. Giving up a world title match is all-time dumb babyface shit. And why would Yoshi deserve an NXT match? He didn't do anything against Oba. This did not make a shred of sense at all. I watched it back. I'm like, maybe there's something I'm missing where it all kind of comes together. It just didn't.
Market zero.
The match should be Trick and Yoshi. Why they're doing Briggs, I just cannot tell you. Vanity Project put over Ethan Page backstage when Ricky Saints approached, speaking in a whisper due to his neck injury, saying he'd be cleared next week and ready to come after him. Jackson Drake, the Evolved champion, said he'd have to go through them first. Ashanti the Adonis then got in Saints' face, saying it was a numbers game and they weren't in his favor, but the other heels all kind of disappeared in the meantime while he was talking. This is one of those strange segments NXT does where it looks like they're setting up one match, only for another opponent to kind of insert himself in the middle. Drake and Vanity Project being overconfident, getting Pages back, that makes perfect sense because of their alignment. Adonis getting involved doesn't, like, at all. I guess we should just wait and see how it's actually booked next week. I will mention, though, I pop every single time he goes Adonisly. Like, every single time. It's actually genius. Tavian Heights with Javon Evans backstage were asking Ren Sinclair whether she spoke to Charlie Dempsey, I presume about getting Heights out of NQCC. She said it's a delicate matter. This is Jasper Troy walked by, casually wearing his massive chains right in the NXT kitchen. It was almost like seeing a video game character, like in a real life scenario. It just didn't make any sense. So Evans popped over to him, offered congrats for going toe-to-toe with Femi. Troy obviously snapped at him, didn't want anything to do with it. Then Dempsey was back around NQCC, suggesting Javon and Tavian fight. Heights can get out of NQCC if he beats Evans. Now, this was a fun twist, just doing the same thing with Miles Bourne. My question remains, why do they want to get out exactly? And why does NXT want to break them up? It was working. People were enjoying it. I suppose the Javon involvement is because he's become friendly with Tavian backstage, but that was never actually shown or explained on screen. A week or two of them talking in the background, that would have gone a long way to having this all kind of fit together and be a little bit more sensible. Maybe Jasper Troy interferes, and that's how Tavian wins, and he kind of extricates himself from NQCC without beating Javon squeaky clean, but you would expect Evans wins this match. So we'll see what happens. Tony D'Angelo and Luca Crucifino got into it again backstage before heading to the ring with Tony demanding his trust and loyalty, forcing him to speak in front of the people. Crucifino said he got kidnapped in the desert before getting let out of the car with Stax taking his phone and saying it was his lucky day. There was no explanation for what happened at Battleground, which I will remind you did not make a shred of sense when it happened. Luca was ready to look him in the eye and promise he was not with Stax when Stax suddenly came out with 3 random, completely unexplained goons telling Crucifino he's never questioned him, unlike D'Angelo for the last month. Tony assumed Luca had turned, but Luca actually attacked the goons. Then he pulled Stax off Tony, but when he swung at him, Stax ducked, and Tony got hit in the face. D'Angelo is great. Neither Crucifino nor Stax are good enough actors to pull this storyline off. This shit is going down like the Titanic as far as I am concerned. Less and less interesting every week. The Mafia gimmick, it needs to die when D'Angelo gets called up. Suffocating these guys in something that does not fit their talents, it is so frustrating to watch. Perhaps there's going to be something that brings it all around full circle and makes me go, oh, okay, that was worth the journey. But at this point, I highly doubt it. It's basically the worst part of NXT Weekly, which is an absolute shame because it could have ended at Battleground and everyone would have been much better for it. There was a better segment, to be fair, between Tony and Luca backstage. They continued to argue. D'Angelo rightly suggested Crucifino prove himself by fighting Stax. He protested that at first. Ava was there explaining she couldn't even book that match because Stax is already fighting Noam Dar for the Heritage Cup because he defeated a former cup holder in D'Angelo. She also said Stax Consigliere signed off on it, which led Tony to think it was Luca. So he protested again and the whole segment kind of ended. Look at that. Ava stuck to her guns on something. I'm still not feeling this at all, but okay, there's more of a hook for next week than I expected after the initial segment. Chase U was back in session. Kale Dixon kept interrupting with questions, so Chase yelled at him, saying he needs to get tough and adapt. So Dixon and Uriah Connors just walked out, said they were disappointed in him. Day one of class, they're not letting the proctor talk, and then they leave when he tells them to shut up. Talk about stuff that is getting too long into the tooth. Why is Chase U continuing when everyone that made it entertaining is no longer allowed in the faction, and the guy who split them up is no longer on television? And how was this thought of as the best way to restart it? By the way, all the extras in the classroom, they looked exactly the same. It was a strange and off-putting segment. I'm not going to call this a filler episode because of those 4 qualifying matches and the contract signing. Those were all significant, but it was absolutely a down week compared to most of the last 2 months. And those 4 matches took the place of a cohesive, show-long storyline that really grabs you. And NXT is usually successful in doing that. Interestingly, with all the call-ups, the men's division seems like it's starting to catch up to the women a little bit. You see the inexperience, and you're not having Julia or Vaquer or Perez kind of carry some of the quote-unquote lesser, and when I say lesser, I mean less experienced, women to higher quality matches. So, those 4 matches, they were entertaining. 3 of them, I would say, delivered, but none of them were like great, where you would say, oh, make sure you watch that match from this week because it was so good because this happened. Maybe Jordan and Lola fits that bill a little bit, but hardly. And so because of that, it was just like a ho-hum edition of NXT, which was, again, disappointing because it had been really, really good over the last month and a half or so. Now, before we get to AEW, brief notes from WWE Evolve. This is 2 episodes in 1. Troy Yearwood was super believable in a tape promo where he changed his name to Jamar Hampton. I would have liked some explanation there. If you're going to build a whole promo around a name change, tell me why he's changing his name. Why is that the name? He won his match with a fireman's carry jackhammer. I thought that was really impressive. Evolve forced me to watch 2 Nikita Lyons matches, which, as far as I'm concerned, is straight up cruel and unusual punishment.
That is one big pile of shit.
One involved Natalya teaming up with Callie Armstrong, the first Evolve champion, who continued to disrespect the veteran for really no reason whatsoever. Callie was, again, crazy impressive. It seemed like Natty might actually challenge for the title in the future, which I'm not really sure about that. Maybe they'll just fight in a non-title match. Cappuccino Jones acquitted himself nicely against Wes Lee. He sold his ass off for the neophyte, even gave him a pair of false finishes during the match. It was probably too much, if we're being honest. Wes should have beaten him easier, but Cappuccino does have a super high ceiling. Legitimately saw a top 3 scissor kick at any level of professional wrestling from any level of experience from Layla Diggs 2 weeks ago. If she can execute that move that way every single time, it should be her finisher. It was like combining a scissor kick and a house call. Awesome. And lastly, Sean Legacy won the first 2 legs of a 3-part Vanity Project gauntlet, failing to become #1 contender for Drake's title. So refreshing to see a singles gauntlet end without someone going the distance, especially when the final leg was 10 seconds. He just got his ass kicked. Lince Dorado got help from Cruz del Toro and Joaquin Wilde, taking out Vanity Project once this was over. This was obviously taped before Wilde got injured, and we haven't seen him on TV since that injury on Raw, or I think it was technically before Raw. So I don't know if the continuation of this has been pre-taped or if it hasn't been. But that wraps up Evolve, like I said, really fast. Just wanted to get through some notable moments from the last 2 hours of that show. And that allows us to move into AEW Grand Slam Mexico. The stage was super cool looking, mostly because that's the way Arena Mexico is set up. But the visuals and lighting, it was great for an American show. The only other real notable item to mention is that this was 2 hours and 30 minutes plus an overrun, which obviously was absurd. But it only went 7 minutes, so it wasn't the end of the world. But if you're doing a 2 hour, 30-minute show, just do a 2 hour and 30-minute show. It was basically a tad longer than a regulation Raw these days. 4 of the 6 matches on the show were technically storyline relevant, so 2/3. That's nice. But a couple of those were not even 1 week builds. They were 1 minute builds from last week. So I was being generous there. The crowd was hot throughout the entire show. It felt as if the audio could have picked them up a little bit better, but it was still clear that they were hot despite the lack of volume through the screen. So I hope that makes sense the way I'm explaining it to you. Let's go ahead and talk about everything that happened on the show. Hangman Page opened, speaking choppy Spanish, of course, saying, Donde luchan los mejores? Ay caramba.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Credit to him for getting through this promo way better than I could have without substantial practice. I can't say more about it because it seemed like he mostly told a personal story, and I couldn't really translate it myself live despite taking 8 years of Spanish. I still know nouns and verbs, but putting it all together, it's difficult. So this was pretty damn impressive, and it was a really smart move for AEW to have their big babyface come out and open the show like this because it showed a personal effort toward the Mexican audience. But again, it was a bit boring for me because it was kind of a milquetoast promo that didn't say much of anything. Will Ospreay, Swerve Strickland, and the Ops fought Jon Moxley, Wheeler Yuta, Young Bucks, and Beast Mortos. This was the main event. Obviously, Mortos replaced Claudio Castagnoli, who had a travel issue. Ospreay wore a white headband. He looked exactly like Kenny Dykstra during this match. Moved better, obviously, but he looked like him. It was hysterical. The two most over wrestlers by far were Ospreay and Samoa Joe. The latter probably from his extended TNA and WWE runs. Will did a sky twister ringside into a pile. Much deeper in the match was a signature exchange. Ospreay and Swerve teamed up to hit their signatures on Mox until the Bucks interfered and Mox rolled up Swerve, grabbing his tights for the 1-2-3. Lots of fun spots and wrestling throughout the match. It was another deflating ending prior to the bell. And when you have like the Ops here and you have Shibata involved and Powerhouse Hobbs even, why are you pinning Swerve? Why exactly are you doing that? Didn't really make sense to me. The heels attacked immediately after the bell, with the Bucks hitting 2 terrible super kicks on Swerve, particularly notable because they usually hit great super kicks. Hangman saved. I forgot to mention, in his pre-match promo, he said he was not allowed in the building until the main event was over. So the main event ended, and he got there like 30 seconds after the bell into the ring. Anyway, he charged down to the ring. They traded blows until Mox ducked the buckshot lariat, and that laid out Matt Jackson. Nick got angry over that. Mox attempted to attack with a briefcase. The faces swarmed. The heels ran away. Hangman and the Bucks, they continued jawing briefly until the show ended. 2 things were clear coming out of this. Ospreay Swerve against the Bucks. That will happen at All In, which if you like the Bucks, that's a really exciting booking. But as someone who likes Ospreay and Swerve and is not a fan of the Bucks, I can't help but be disappointed that they're being booked that way in this match on the biggest show of the year. But this is not at all equivalent, by the way, to like Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens against the Usos. That was an extremely long-term story. 2 best friends, title on the line. This is 2 guys teaming up because they're not bad guys. I digress. The other thing that became clear is Hangman's winning the title at All In. Yes, they've been building to that inevitability, no doubt about it. But seeing how much help Hangman had here at the end, it made clear this is not a Cody Rhodes situation where you may be surprised this person or that person comes out to help. In his case, John Cena and The Undertaker. You have Death Riders and the Bucks, I guess throw in Gabe Kidd. But Hangman already has Swerve, Ospreay, the Ops, Willow, and presumably Omega if needed. That's 8 on 8 right there. Throw in like Darby Allin or hell, even Sting or both of them as the difference makers, the thing that takes Hangman over the top. And yeah, Paige is going to win the title at All In. Pretty clear after this. Mystico fought MJF. The Mystico entrance in Arena Mexico was simply incredible. Moment of the night by margin. There's over, and then there's over. And Mystico is over in Mexico, hermano. MJF wore MVP gear again, American flag style. It was ugly as sin, but that was the entire point. MJF spit in Mystico's face, poked him in the eye, only to half sell a Canadian destroyer. And you saw him squat to take it. Really not believable. MJF walked out, yet caught Mystico running for a tombstone pile driver on the stage. Mystico sat up like The Undertaker with a camera that kept moving back and forth between the ring and the stage. Really vomit-inducing. How they didn't just have a second shot, I have no idea. Mystico caught him on the rope for a Spanish fly that looked like a flip over Uranagi. He hit his armbar finisher La Mystica, but the referee got distracted by MVP during the tap out. MJF low-blowed him for a false finish, then low-blowed him a second time right in front of the referee for a disqualification. Hurt Syndicate attacked. MJF unmasked Mystico, then put it on. Finally, after all this time, 3 luchadors distracted so Mike Bailey and Kevin Knight could attack from behind. Mystico somehow had a replacement mask during this, I guess. It was in his jock or something like that. The entrance was fantastic. The match, I gotta say, it was mediocre given the talent of both guys. Extremely plodding, but the fans were ebbing and flowing with it appropriately. They completely bought into the back and forth, and that's what's most important. Then you get the finish. What a mess. The DQ was understandable since MJF is trying to level up for the AEW title, yet you can't have him beat Mystico in Mexico, but it could have been far, far more creative and impactful. Then Mystico gets unmasked in Mexico for no real reason. MJF is already a detestable heel. He's done this before with other luchadors, so it didn't add anything to his character. Despite being in Arena Mexico with a backstage full of his peers, Mystico apparently doesn't have anyone's respect because no one comes out to save him despite a ton of time transpiring between the second low blow, the DQ, the attack, and the unmasking. They finally come out. They don't even bother attacking so that the AEW talents can do it. Were they late because they were strategizing this plan backstage? This was on its way to being the best part of the entire show. But I got to be honest, man, it completely fell apart. It felt like a waste of time. Everything since MJF has joined Syndicate, the lead up was great. Everything since he actually joined them, for me, has been disappointing. It comes across like the plan was maybe for Syndicate to reject him, but it got so over that they changed plans and didn't know exactly what to do. That might not be correct. That's the way it comes across. Kazuchika Okada fought Mark Briscoe in a non-title match. This was booked basically because Briscoe was angry at Okada for attacking Omega, so I gave it relevancy credit, even if it didn't really develop on TV. What made me laugh was commentary showing footage of Omega vomiting blood last week, and I am not joking. They basically said immediately after, well, that was the diverticulitis coming up. And they also already knew that he would be cleared for All In a month from now, despite that visual of a guy coughing up thick, dark blood. They didn't even try to cast some doubt. Despite all of that violence that was attempted in the attack, really bad by them. We know Kenny Omega is going to do his best to try to make it for All In. Right now, we don't know if he can. We're going to have an update on his status next week. That's all you need to say. But they didn't. Briscoe bit the bird that Okada flipped at him and hit Froggy Bow. Okada came back with a tombstone piledriver and Rainmaker got the win. Nice match. It was the best part of hour one by a mile because that was 3 total segments, but it actually fell below my expectations for these guys. I want to say they had a tournament match recently that just blew me away. And this was like a facsimile of that. The CMLL Women's Championship was on the line. Zeusis against Mercedes Mone. Another match that technically had set up, but it was truly the bare minimum. Mercedes got caught flying early for a great lung blower and later for a pump handle bomb. Monet then took her off the ropes with the Spanish-style World's Strongest Slam. Third time we saw that on the same episode of TV, by the way. And it was the 5th time we've seen it on AEW in 2 weeks to suddenly win the title. Toni Storm then came out, first as like an old-timey detective on a video, then Carmen Sandiego. She sniffed Mercedes' hair and then German suplexed her as she was still holding like 6 different titles. Storm then said, "Let the games begin," and writhed around on stage as she always does. I'm not even really sure what to say here. I get that Monet is doing the belt collector gimmick, but she recently dropped one of them. So why did she add the CMLL strap here? It felt completely unnecessary, and doing it so suddenly without her finisher in a 9-minute match that had a commercial during it, buried on this card, it was really odd. Storm looked great. Mercedes titles flying around the squared circle like sonic rings, like when he gets knocked out. It was a hysterical visual, one of my favorite moments on the show. But it was just one of those decisions where it was like, okay, I guess. Like, I almost think it would have been better if Tony distracted her the same way. Zeusis retained the title, and that excused the loss for Mercedes. Then she could have done a similar attack, and Monet would have a big-time reason to be angry at her. Most notable here is Mercedes is the first woman and second person to win a title in the 3 major promotions worldwide, WWE, New Japan, and CMLL. The only other is Shinsuke Nakamura. That's the list. Mercedes Moné, Shinsuke Nakamura. And she's the first woman to compete in Madison Square Garden, Tokyo Dome, Wembley Stadium, and Arena Mexico, the most notable venues in the United States, Japan, England, and Mexico. That is huge. So congratulations to her. Ricochet, Leo Rush, Hologram, and Mascara Dorada fought in a 4 million pesos match. Leo wore perhaps the most ridiculous mask I've ever seen in wrestling. Commentary tried to tell us it was him mocking Lucha Libre. It was not. He wears dumb stuff all the time thinking it's cool. This was another one of those money matches taking place for no reason whatsoever. Dorada hit a sick catch crucifix bomb, the single best move on the entire show. Ricochet took him down with a double stomp midair before Leo did 3 poison ranas in succession. Hologram ultimately pinned Leo with portal bomb as Ricochet was stuck on the ropes and Dorada was just down ringside. This was the obvious outcome here. It was a damn fun match. 3.75 stars B+. When I say Dorada was the MVP, I don't mean he was just the best wrestler in the match. He was by far the most exciting and talented wrestler in the match, and he was the standout of the entire show. Dare I say, over the last 2 lucha adjacent shows between WWE and AEW, he was second only to Hijo del Vikingo. Dorada is an absurd individual. He moves incredibly well for 36. I'd love to see a lot more from him. Adam Cole, Daniel Garcia, Brody King, Bandito, Templario, Atlantis, and Atlantis Jr. fought Kyle Fletcher, Konosuke Takeshita, Josh Alexander, Dax Harwood, Hechicero, and Volador Jr. in a 14-man match. This was so convoluted of a concept that only one person was allowed on the apron at a given time for each team. Some of those involved were from TV, like storyline building. Others were just added randomly for no reason whatsoever. The most notable parts of this match were Brody wearing an Abolish Ice shirt and the crowd being all about Adam Cole during his entrance. It was kind of random. Maybe NXT aided because he was on top of that for so long. Not totally sure. At one point, all the faces just decided to fight at the same time. If you thought tagging was non-existent in regular AEW matches, this one was a new level. Basically, everyone cleared the ringside area so Atlantis could get revenge on Dax with a small package 1, 2, 3. If this was 10 men in the third hour of the show, maybe I could see the purpose. But as the opening match, big time yikes. Rough start to the show, especially coming immediately after the Hangman promo, which again was great, but just boring. So like the first 45 minutes of this show, you're like, oh my God, like just let's get on with this. All in all, Grand Slam Mexico was good. The pacing was probably the best part. It never felt like we were waiting around for something to happen. The final 90 minutes absolutely crushed the opening 60, which were an absolute slog. The only matches that personally hit for me were the main event and the money match, because the Mone title win was just so meh, as I described. But Mercedes and Tony, they had the best moment maybe with the titles flying across the ring. Most disappointing was Mystico MJF. And the worst part of the show was that 14-man slop fest, which I never want to see something like that again. I saw some people saying this was an all-time TV show, top 5 Dynamite. Neither of those is close to being accurate. I'm not sure what people are watching if they actually think either of those statements is true. There have been better straight wrestling TV shows, even just from AEW, far better episodes of TV when you include storytelling, and probably 25 better episodes of Dynamite, at least 20 better. It's okay to say you really like something without exaggerating. This was a good show. It wasn't memorable. It's nothing I'll ever watch again. And it did fall below my expectations given that first hour. But certainly a better watch than the last few weeks because it was 2.5 hours of Dynamite, not 2 hours of shitty Collision, tacked on to a very good 2-hour Dynamite, which is what the last 2 weeks of television had been. So that wraps up this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. On the way out, let me hit you with some of those reminders again. First, that this show
is all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Follow us on social media at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky. And please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
Hope you do as well, because for $5 a month, $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news analysis posts every week. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. We will be back on Tuesday talking all things WWE again next Thursday for NXT and AEW. But at this point, it is time for the Silver King to sign off and leave you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.